She stood near the back of the grand ballroom, quietly admiring the art on display, unaware that the whispers had already started. She must be lost. Did someone bring their assistant tonight? Look at her shoes. Are those even designer? The women in satin gowns chuckled softly behind champagne flutes. The men didn't bother to hide their smirks. After all, in a room full of high society and high bidders, a woman in a modest dress with no visible label was easy to overlook. She wasn't holding a paddle, she wasn't name-dropping, she wasn't posing for photographers. And when she leaned in to study a vintage sculpture up for auction, one woman rolled her eyes and muttered, "She can look all she wants. No way she can afford to bid." But what none of them knew, her husband hadn't arrived yet. And when he walked through those gilded double doors moments later, the tone of the entire evening would shift. Because the man they were all waiting for, the anonymous top donor, the one expected to make headlines, wasn't just anyone. He was hers. And when he found out how his wife had been treated, he wouldn't just bid, he'd own the night, one number at a time. Her name was Hania Mirza, poised, composed, and entirely comfortable being overlooked. She did not need to announce herself when she entered a room. She wasn't chasing attention, because she had long since learned that true value doesn't need to raise its voice. Tonight, she had come alone, at her husband's insistence. "Go ahead," he had said earlier that day. "I'll be a bit late, but I want you to see the sculpture collection. I think you'll love it." So she came, alone, in a simple navy dress, no diamonds, no designer clutch, just the quiet elegance of a woman with nothing to prove. The charity auction was the social event of the month, filled with CEOs, celebrities, and luxury watch collectors who treated bidding wars like sport. It was hosted by a prominent foundation that raised funds for children's hospitals, and every guest knew the event doubled as a performance of power, and to them Hania didn't look the part. As she browsed the silent auction displays, she heard snippets of conversation, not about the art, but about her. "Where's her sponsor? She probably got invited by accident. She hasn't even picked up a bidding paddle." Hania said nothing. She simply stepped aside when they brushed past her at the champagne table and admired a portrait from the 1800s. She liked the texture, the story in the eyes. What she didn't like, the sneering tone of a woman nearby who leaned over to a friend and whispered, "Sweetheart, unless she's married to a sheikh, she's not walking out with anything tonight." The irony, she was married to someone even more powerful, not in gold chains or palace titles, but in quiet control. Zayan Mirza, founder of a multinational investment group, a man whose name rarely made headlines because his actions always made impact first, and he was minutes away from entering the ballroom. The guests were expecting him, but no one expected that the simple woman by the sculpture was the reason he was coming at all. As the auction officially began, Hania quietly took a seat in the back row, unnoticed by most, unwanted by a few. The host took the stage, lights dimmed, and the bidding began with polished confidence. A painting here, a luxury vacation package there, each item accompanied by loud cheers, flutes of champagne raised in casual victory, and names announced like titles of royalty. Lot 7, a one-of-a-kind sculpture from the Italian Renaissance collection, starting at 50,000. Gasps. Applause. Hania leaned forward slightly. It was the piece Zayan had mentioned, the one he said reminded him of her. Soft edges, strong stance, timeless. She watched as the bidding began. 55, 60, 75, 80. The voices came fast, confident, from rows closer to the stage, men in tuxedos, women dripping in diamonds. And behind them all, the sneering commentary returned. "She's still here? She didn't even lift a paddle. Maybe she thinks watching makes her part of it." A woman 2 rows ahead glanced back with a patronizing smile. "If you're interested, dear," she called out sweetly, "the charity shop down the street has some lovely replicas." Several people chuckled. Even the auctioneer paused, unsure whether to address the remark or ignore it. Hania simply offered a polite nod. She would not trade grace for approval, but deep down, the sting was real. She had come for the art, not to be the evening's entertainment. At that moment, she reached into her bag and texted one word, "Now." 2 minutes later, the ballroom doors opened. The room fell still. Zayan Mirza stepped through, tall, calm, utterly composed. He did not scan the crowd. He walked straight toward the back, to the woman in the navy dress who had just been laughed at. Without a word, he leaned down, kissed her cheek, and took the empty seat beside her. And just like that, the entire temperature of the room changed. The same guests who had written her off now sat straighter. The whispers turned to stunned silence, and when the auctioneer, now nervously aware of who had arrived, cleared his throat and announced, "Do I hear 85,000 for the sculpture?" Zayan raised his paddle. 250,000. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The auctioneer blinked. "Sir, 250, confirmed." "Yes," Zayan replied, eyes fixed calmly on the sculpture. "And I would like to gift it to the children's hospital in my wife's name." Hania didn't speak. She didn't need to. The room stared. The woman they had mocked? She was now the name being engraved on the charity's donor wall. Silence fell across the ballroom. The woman in the navy dress, the one they had whispered about, ignored, mocked, was now the name behind the highest bid of the night. And not just a bid, a gift. The auctioneer fumbled for words. 250,000 going once. He barely finished the sentence before another paddle raised. 275, came a sharp voice from the front. It was Adrian Roth, a hedge fund manager known more for ego than generosity. He smirked as he looked back at Zayan, clearly hoping to outshine him with a display of wealth. Zayan didn't blink. "500,000, he said simply. Gasps turned into stunned murmurs. Heads turned. Some phones were subtly lifted under the tables. Adrian raised his paddle again. 550. Zayan raised his again without hesitation. 1,000,000. The room froze. Even the auctioneer stopped mid-sentence, speechless. He looked toward the host of the charity event, who nodded in disbelief. Zayan finally stood, slowly buttoning his suit jacket. 1,000,000. Final bid in my wife's name. And then, for the first time that night, he turned toward the rows of shocked guests, many of whom had laughed just minutes earlier. "My wife sat here, quietly, and admired the work this charity is doing," he said, voice calm but clear. "And while some of you saw her simplicity as insignificance, I saw what I always have, grace." He glanced at Hania, then back to the room. "Your laughter was louder than her voice, but her impact will outlast your applause." No one spoke. Across the room, the same woman who had sneered at Hania earlier now looked down at her untouched dessert, face flushed. The auctioneer raised his gavel. "Sold to Mr. Zayan Mirza, in honor of Mrs. Hania." Mirza, thunderous applause erupted, but it was no longer the shallow clapping from earlier. It was heavier now, embarrassed, awkward, forced. Zayan sat back down beside his wife and whispered, "I wasn't coming to outbid them. I just wanted to remind them who you are." Hania smiled softly. "You didn't need to, but they did." Backstage, the event organizers quickly scrambled to update the donor display. The charity's director approached Hania, humbled. "We're honored to have your name on this, truly." Hania nodded graciously. "It's not about my name. It's about the children who will benefit. Just make sure they feel seen, even when no one's watching." And with that, the tone of the night was reset, because the woman they tried to forget had just become the name they'd never be able to ignore. The ballroom gradually returned to motion. Champagne poured. Conversations resumed. But the mood had shifted. The laughter was softer. The arrogance muted. And everywhere Hania walked, eyes followed. Not with mockery, but with a quiet sort of awe. She and Zayan didn't linger. After the sculpture was officially dedicated in her name, they quietly made their way toward the exit, declining photos and attention along the way. "You could have let them sit with their ignorance," Hania said softly as they stepped into the crisp night air. "I could have," Zayan replied, adjusting his coat. "But some lessons echo louder when money isn't the loudest part of the story." She smiled. "You made your point." "No," he said, glancing at her. "You made the point, I just underlined it." Back inside the ballroom, the event organizers quickly updated the live donation tally. Volunteers in the Children's Hospital program whispered excitedly about what the funds could now cover. New beds, equipment, training. One intern turned to the other and said, "You know what's wild? Everyone's talking about the husband, but she's the one who never said a word and still changed the whole room." And that's exactly how Hania preferred it. Not as the center of attention, but as the reminder that sometimes the most powerful person at the auction isn't the one with the biggest voice or the flashiest outfit. It's the one who lets her actions and her silence speak for her. Hania never sought the spotlight. She didn't walk into the gala to compete. She came to support a cause and left, reminding an entire room what real grace looks like. Not because she raised her voice, but because she never needed to. And the moment they laughed at her, they weren't laughing at her appearance. They were revealing their own character. Have you ever been judged for how you looked, dressed, or walked into a room? Or maybe you've seen someone else get dismissed, only for the truth to flip everything upside down. Share your story in the comments, because what you've experienced might just be the reminder someone else needs to never shrink themselves. If this story resonated with you, subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with us. Here, we tell stories that speak softly, but hit deeply. And remember, respect doesn't come after wealth. It comes from character. And those who treat others based on what they wear or how loudly they speak always end up clapping for the person they ignored. Until next time, stay kind, stay quiet if you must, and never let someone else define your worth.